Our today's guest, Terry Anzur, speaks from more than 30 years of on-air experience in TV news. Although she comes from United States of America, her ancestors came from Slovenian soil, and therefore Terry is also a dual citizen of the USA and Slovenia. I have to present you with I have to present some of her career achievements. Firstly, she was an assistant professor at the University of Southern California, Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, before founding her own media trading company. She holds an AB in communication from Stanford University and was a Benton Fellow at the University of Chicago. Terry is the author of a book, Inventing TV News, Live and Local in Los Angeles. She also co-authored a study college book. Her students and clients have included journalists, authors, actors, athletes, faith leaders, corporate spokespersons, and government officials. Terry co-hosted a national news program on the NBC-owned network America's Talking. She presented daily newscasts on KTLA TV and on CBS stations. She reported from Washington, D.C. for the NBC-owned stations and also anchored at many American local stations. She began her career in print journalism and delivered radio news at KFI in Los Angeles. Furthermore, she has also appeared as a journalist in movies, TV series, and reality TV programming. An important fact to mention is also that as a Fulbright specialist, Terry has taught post-conflict reporting in Sri Lanka and workshops on the image of the journalist in Pakistan. She was the lead consultant on the Maldives Media Training Project, preparing state-run broadcast media and government spokespersons for the country's first democratic multi-party elections. She has trained news anchors and reporters for Vietnam television and has participated in journalist exchanges. Finally, she also leads her own travel journalism website, which was inspired by her own media world traveling. Overall, based on her experiences, I think she holds more than enough knowledge to provide us with some interesting and useful information about media and propaganda.
Well, thank you, Andrash, for that very kind introduction. I always feel really tired when I hear somebody read my CV. I can't believe I did all that stuff. Thank you for an excellent introduction to get the evening started. Thanks to all of you for coming out on a Tuesday night. And I want to thank especially the Jesuit College and Father Damien for the honor of being invited to speak in this lecture series. Also, for allowing me to be the first speaker to present in English. I can assure you that if I had to do this in Slovenian, it would be a really short conversation. To je res, to ni res, in to je to. Konec. That's it. Well, I'm going to go on a little bit longer than that. The topic chosen by the students here was, how does propaganda function? So I decided to start by finding out who's changing the slides for me, because I don't have the clicker. Little technical difficulty here. Okay. Good. This could be a really short talk. Okay, well then take it away. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so I decided to start. You know, when you do live television, you just kind of get used to this kind of stuff, so it's okay. I started to look up the word propaganda in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the most respected dictionary of American English. And this is what I found. Propaganda is today most often used in reference to political statements, but the word comes to our language through its use in a religious context. The Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, Congregation for Propagating the Faith, was an organization established in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV as a means of furthering Catholic missionary activities. The word propaganda, derived from Latin meaning to propagate, and you can still find this organization today in Rome. It exists as the Society for the Propagation of the Faith. It's on the Vatican's website, and it has an office. Guess where? In the Palace of Propaganda. So we can conclude from this, perhaps, that this problem of propaganda all around us in social media and everywhere we turn these days, it's all the Catholics' fault. Well, going back to the dictionary, over time, the meaning of the word changed. It was not until the beginning of the 19th century that it began to be used as a term denoting ideas or information that are of questionable accuracy as a means of advancing a cause. Two important things there: questionable accuracy and advancing a cause. So, how did this happen? Over the space of 400 years, we've gone from Catholic missionaries preaching the faith to information of questionable accuracy advancing a cause. The word has changed over time, like many words change in the English language. Please change to the next slide. Take the word gay, for example. It's the holidays, and during the holidays in America, you hear a very popular song called Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Have you heard it? The first time this song was sung was in a movie in 1944. And Judy Garland was singing it to a little girl who was sad during the holidays. And she wanted that little girl to put on a party dress and celebrate and be happy. Well, now today, when someone sings, Have a Merry Christmas and make the Yuletide gay, it just sounds a little weird. The meaning of the word has changed. Another slippery word that we're going to be dealing with tonight is information. So, next slide, please. Let's go back to the definition on that. Information is knowledge that is obtained from investigation, study, or instruction. The synonyms are intelligence, data, facts, and news. I would add to that information is a basic human need for survival. We need information just to find food or shelter based on the information that we have. And then because we're human beings and we're curious, we want to know about the people and the events around us, not only because we want to avoid danger, but because it's interesting. And we might be able to make better decisions for ourselves if we know what's going on with other people. So we want information that is new. We don't want information that is old or outdated. And we certainly don't want information that's bad or wrong. And that brings me to the definition of news. News is new information that is delivered in a timely manner. Over time, journalists have defined the other qualities that make something newsworthy: who, what, when, where, and why. The 5 W's in English. I guess in Slovenian it would be the 4 K's and a Z. Kdo, kje, yeah? Star student. Perfect. So, whatever language you're talking, we need those elements because we want the whole story, not part of the story. Some other things that make something newsworthy: proximity. Where is it happening? Is it close to me? Is it close to you? Is it close to Ljubljana? Impact. How many people are affected? Am I affected? Are you affected? Prominence. Are any famous people involved? That makes something more newsworthy. What about conflict or controversy? If an event causes controversy, it's likely to be in the news. An unusual event. If a dog bites a person, that happens all the time. But what if a man bites a dog? That is unusual, and that's going to make the news. And finally, there's the issue of secrecy. News is something that happens when something that was previously kept secret is revealed. So, in other words, we want information, we want the truth, and we certainly don't want propaganda, information of questionable accuracy. We want knowledge obtained from investigation, study, or instruction. But a funny thing is happening to the word information. Next slide. Yay! All right. Funny thing is happening to the word information. In recent years, we've been hearing a lot about misinformation and disinformation. Take a look at this chart, which is based on the Semantic Scholar Open Research Corpus. That's a database of millions of scholarly papers that have been published since 1970. And this database simply counts them and analyzes the content. There's no political bias or affiliation. So why the sudden increase that we see here beginning in 2016 and then really taking off in 2020? Well, okay, in 2016 there was the unexpected result of an American election, but I think it's more explained by the pandemic, which affected the whole world starting in 2020 and continuing after that. The blue line is news media reports about misinformation and disinformation. The red line is a little bit later on because it takes the academic people time to study it and write a paper and make a comment. Another thing that has started to happen during this huge increase is the rise of artificial intelligence and more people using it. So that might be some of it as well. Yes, social media plays a role, but social media has been around since the 1990s. And it really didn't start until much more recently. So I would downplay the effect of social media. Let's take a closer look at these words. Misinformation is simply misleading or wrong. I tell you it's going to rain tomorrow, it turns out to be sunny. Oh, I'm sorry, I was misinformed about the forecast. That's no big deal, most of the time. Disinformation is something much more sinister. False information that is deliberately and often covertly spread in order to influence public opinion or obscure the truth. Disinformation aims to hide the truth, change your mind, and provoke an emotional response. Here's an example. Last October, Hurricane Helene ripped through the United States, destroying entire towns. And during that time, my social media feeds filled up with posts like this. You can see here a little girl holding a puppy in what appears to be a rescue boat. And the person posting that picture wrote, "My friend posted this earlier and I had to copy and paste since I couldn't say it better. I saw this photo of a frightened little girl and her puppy. How will she respond to the sound of rolling thunder now? Will she love jumping in mud puddles? Will she ever recover from this trauma? She didn't bring this upon herself. My heart is breaking. Pray for the victims of Hurricane Helene and soon to be victims of incoming Hurricane Kirk. Pray for the United States of America. We're in pain." Wow, I'm a compassionate person. I really think I should share this. A lot of people did. Famous journalists, public officials. This post was shared and this picture was shared thousands of times. So, before we share it, let's run it through a fact-checking website.
You may have seen viral posts on social media like these claiming to show little girls who survived Hurricane Helene carrying puppies in what appear to be rescue boats. Verify viewers reached out to ask if those images are real. Using these sources, we can verify they are not. They were created with generative AI. Using TinEye, a reverse image search tool, we looked for other instances of these images being published online and found no reputable news outlets, humanitarian agencies, or rescue teams publishing these images. The posts sharing the images also lack details like who was involved, and when and where it happened. And while AI images are getting better, there are some subtle things in the images that indicate they're AI. In one image, between the puppy's head and the girl's hair, there's a white space, with the background missing. In the other, the girl appears to be missing one of her ears and 2 of her fingernails, and both have facial expressions that are extreme and cartoonish. So, no, these photos claiming to show girls and puppies being rescued after Hurricane Helene are not real. They were made with AI. Images like these are often shared with the intent to pull at heartstrings. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency says disinformation campaigns like this seek to elicit an emotional reaction that overpowers critical thinking. With your Verify, I'm Brandon Lewis.
I am so happy I did not share that picture. Why? You're happy you didn't share it too, right? There's a lot to unpack in that video. There is an actual government agency for cybersecurity misinformation. I did not really know that, but it exists in America, and there's a similar one in Europe. It's these AI images are coming at us, and they're going to get better and better, and we have to check before we share. And I think many people in this room are saying, "Oh, I didn't fall for that. I knew that was fake from the beginning." Well, there's a bigger issue here. Aren't there real victims of the disaster that need our help? Take a look at this picture, and I admit it's very hard to see in the light here, but there's a young girl on a roof, and she's stranded in a huge flood, and she has a plastic box, and in the box is a small puppy. So, is this picture real? It was pretty easy to find out. I went to a search engine and I put in girl and puppy stranded on roof in Hurricane Helene floods. And I came up with this article, which is from the Louisville Courier-Journal, a very respected newspaper that is in the biggest city near the town where the girl was stranded. And in this story, a journalist showed the picture and all of the facts about the girl. Her name, Chloe Adams, the dog's name, the name of the town, the names of her family members, her story that she called for help and no one came, and she waited for 5 hours on the roof until her family found a kayak and her cousin rescued first the dog and then her. Once I knew the girl's name, I could search for her name, the name of the town, and I got this list of other media that had covered the same story with the same picture, with different pictures, but mostly the same facts. CNN covered it, 2 local television stations covered it, and other newspapers in the area. Well, that's what journalists are for. That's their job. I became a journalist in the 1970s because I thought it was the coolest job in the world. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, but it didn't work out for me. So I started working on the school newspaper and then I went to Stanford and I worked on the college newspaper and got out of school, worked for a newspaper and a wire service, and finally someone asked me if I wanted to try reporting on TV. I couldn't believe that people would pay me money to go to events and interview famous people and maybe not so famous people and tell their story on TV. I got more experience and moved up to bigger cities and bigger news outlets and did a national show and presented the news in New York and Los Angeles. And during 30 years on TV, I covered just about everything: politics, crime, and yes, even floods. Here I am reporting for a TV station in New York on a flood in neighboring New Jersey. So I can speak to you from experience on how professional journalists are trained to discover the truth and not propaganda. What we need to deliver the news are facts and also opinions. And they're 2 very different things. Facts are supported by primary sources: video and photos from the scene, interviews with people who were there, first responders, victims, family members, and other eyewitnesses. Facts can also come from official sources, such as a government official or a government document. In the case of the teenage girl on the roof, she says she called the emergency number on her phone and told someone she needed help, but no one came. A good reporter might request the public record of the emergency calls on that day and then start asking questions about why no one answered that girl's call for help. You might even be able to get a recording of the call for help and play it on TV as part of your report. You don't have to be a journalist to recognize the difference between a fact and an opinion. An opinion is a view or a judgment formed in the mind. It can be based on fact, but it's not the same thing as a fact. For example, it's a fact that two different beers, both Union and Lashko, are brewed in Slovenia. I'm sure every beer drinker in this room has an opinion about which one is better. You might think you have the right opinion, but that doesn't make it a fact. Your opinion might be different based on the facts that you have. For example, you tried Lashko when the beer was warm and it didn't taste very good, so you thought it was bad. But the job of a journalist is to present all sides of a story, all the different opinions, and that allows you, the viewers, readers, and users, to make up your own mind. There's another thing to be aware of: attribution. If something in a story makes you say, "Oh, really? Who said that?" you need attribution. You need to identify who said it and, if possible, what facts the opinion is based on. For example, if someone shares their opinion that a flood was caused by climate change, you need attribution. It makes a difference if the source is an expert in the field or a political activist with a special interest in promoting certain policies. As a professional journalist, you have to explain who said it and why. One of the most important lessons I learned as a journalist way back in the day is that there are consequences for being wrong. If I published a story that was wrong, I could lose my job. I could be sued in court. I could go to jail. Or at the very least, I would lose people's trust. No one would want to be interviewed by me, and people would no longer believe the stories I was trying to tell. Every time I put my name on a story, I was literally betting my job on it. There were consequences for being wrong. As a young journalist, I was told that absolutely everything has to have a primary source or an attribution. Among journalists, we have a saying that goes, "If your mother says she loves you, check it out." Back in the 70s, when I started reporting, most Americans only had a choice of 3 TV stations or radio stations and maybe 1 or 2 local newspapers. There was a very limited number of national news media, only 3 broadcasting networks. Looking back, there was bias. Most of my fellow journalists were on the left, but we had a code of ethics about that. As a journalist, I was obligated to be fair and not disclose my personal opinions. I did not register with a political party, and I did not ever tell anyone how I voted. Back then, a journalist could lose his or her job by going out into the street and joining a protest because they would no longer be seen as fair and independent. There's a big firewall between the facts of a story and the journalist's opinion about the story. At least there was back then. There was also a firewall between the story and the advertising. In one station, the people reporting the news were not even allowed to talk to the people selling the advertising. Well, just like the meaning of words, over time, the media has changed. And now we have a landscape that looks something like this. This is a media bias chart of popular media outlets in the United States. And it is the opinion of an organization called All Sides. The man who owns the organization is on the right, but he started it because he wanted to reach out to the left and find common ground. And what they did was they analyzed the content of the media, and this is the 2024 chart where they rated all of the different outlets as far left, center, center right, and far right. Now, this is an opinion, and it's possible to disagree with it. For example, I would say the BBC is more on the left. I don't think it's in the center at all. I would also put The Hill and Newsweek on the left, but the Wall Street Journal, I believe, is more on the right. So you can move things back and forth, but basically, whenever you consume news or information, you should be aware that the source is somewhere on the chart of media bias. What about Slovenia? Here's a chart that was made in 2017 by a professor named Žiga Turk, also a former politician. I'm sure many of you know him. And in his opinion, we see TV Slovenia and MMC RTV, Delo, Dnevnik, Mladina, and others on the left. You have Seal.net and Finance in the middle, with Družina, Reporter, Demokracija, and Nova 24 on the right. So this is something we can talk about more in the question and answer period. But no matter where you are, America, Slovenia, any country in the world, anywhere in the EU, the reality is that all of these media outlets are fighting to stay in business. And the business model does not reward telling the truth. What's the good of telling it if nobody's reading and nobody's watching? Media can be wrong or misleading as long as they get enough clicks to stay in business and make money. So, because so much of what is in the media is wrong, that started the big business of fact checking. And guess what? The fact checkers also have a bias. We saw on the American media chart, there was an organization called USA Today. That is the Gannett Company, which changed its name to Tegna, and they own the website that verified the picture of the girl and the puppy as being fake. And they are firmly on the left. Politico is something that we're going to talk about here in the next example. They are also on the left. So we can take a look at some reporting from them and see how that affects the news that they're giving out to the public. What we do have today is a situation that Elon Musk described in a comment last year when he said, the media is best thought of as a click maximizing machine, not a truth maximizing machine. Okay, so journalists have a bias. Let's just bypass them and Google it. Well, that doesn't help either, because Google will tell you, and is quoted in this book as saying, Google is a search engine, not a truth engine. We can give you information, but we can't tell you the truth of a thing. Okay, now we're really in trouble. The journalists are not trustworthy. The fact checkers are not trustworthy. The internet is biased. You are on your own. So in preparation for this talk tonight, I attended a Stanford University webinar with the authors of this book, Verified: How to Think Straight, Get Duped Less, and Make Better Decisions About What to Believe Online. And I'm going to donate this book to the Jesuit College Library, so you can all take a look at it when you have time. They have a strategy that will help you as you're trying to sift through all the propaganda that's coming your way. SIFT stands for stop, investigate the source, get off of the page you're on, and put the source in your browser and figure out where the bias is. Find other coverage, like we did with the picture of the girl on the roof. If it was true, we're going to find a lot of other coverage. And that other coverage may tell you that the original source didn't have the whole story. Trace the claim to the original context, which goes back to the primary sources that journalists use. Who was there? What are the government documents involved? Not, oh, I heard this from my friend who posted it on Facebook, but who are the primary sources who are there? A few more tips. Sites that end in .org are not more trustworthy than .com. Basically, anybody can buy those domains for a few dollars. So just because you see something that, .org, that's not automatically more trustworthy than other websites. Nonprofits and NGOs are not more trustworthy than government agencies. Always read the About page and follow the money. It's really helpful if you can figure out where a news source or a website, where the money comes from. One of the oldest rules in journalism is follow the money, because that's where you're always going to find a story. And watch out for headlines that are misleading. Okay, here's the story from Politico about the bad flooding that took place in Spain recently. And Politico, as we noticed, was firmly on the left. The headline is pretty scary. Spain's monster flood exposed Europe's unpreparedness for climate change. Wow, I'd be so scared by that headline, I'd hit the share button right away. They even quoted Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, as saying these terrible floods show the dramatic reality of climate change. Is she a scientist? No, she's a politician. What does she know? And if you read the story, there were a lot of other things going on. The Spanish politicians were quoted as blaming each other for not warning people that the storm was coming. And so people went out in the street, they got caught in the flood, and many people were killed. And then there was too much development in the area that was flooded. And a geologist commented that with all the concrete and all the development, the drainage was bad and there was nowhere for the water to go. If you look up this geologist, you find out that he is a very well-respected scientist and he is often quoted on this particular topic. So overall, the person who wrote this story did a pretty good job of journalism. They told many different angles of what was going on, but if you only read the headline, which reflected the bias of the organization, you would be misled. So by now you're saying, I have a life, I have a job, I have a family, I have stuff I want to do. I don't have time to go around being a fact checker. Why doesn't the government do something? They could license journalists so that only good journalists would be reporting. They could make it a crime to distribute misinformation or disinformation. And as this chart shows, many governments around the world, including the EU and the United States, are doing just that. Some have tried to shut down the internet completely. Others are going to social media outlets like Facebook and asking them to censor information that the government doesn't like. And they're just trying anything they can to get control of the flow of information. Lost my place here. But this is a dangerous question to ask. Do you really want the government to do this? What if the only information that you get is the information that the government approves of? What if the only journalists who are working are the journalists that are approved by the government and can get a license? We saw during the pandemic that some things the government said turned out to be false. And what if all the information is just what the government likes and everything else is suppressed? That is censorship. Which brings me to freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is guaranteed in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and many countries, including Slovenia, guarantee people freedom of expression in their constitution. But America's First Amendment in the Bill of Rights goes farther than that. Let's take a closer look at the words. Congress shall make no law, not some law, maybe a little law, no law, respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So it's not the first thing speech, it's religion. There are some developing countries where I've taught journalism where they say they have free speech, but they don't, because they don't have freedom of religion. See you nodding. I taught in Maldives, which is a country where you must be a practicing Sunni Muslim in order to be a citizen. And if you say anything against the Muslim religion, that is a crime called blasphemy. I nearly landed on the prison island myself because my students went out and did a story on Valentine's Day. And the main street in the capital of Maldives was filled with stores selling hearts and candy and flowers for people to give to their sweetheart. And the only problem with this is that Valentine's Day is a Christian pagan holiday. It is not a Muslim holiday. And by promoting it, I and my students had committed blasphemy, and we were in a lot of trouble. Well, the early settlers in America came largely because of freedom of religion. They didn't want to have an official state religion like the Church of England, and they certainly didn't want a king. They wanted an elected government that would serve the people. So they put the freedom of religion first, followed by speech, giving the people the right to speak up and criticize the government. And if the government didn't listen, they had the right to get together and ask the government to solve the problem. That is all there in the First Amendment. People say, oh, it's about free speech, but it's about a lot more. And I really believe that this is America's gift to the world. Since the First Amendment was passed in 1791, the courts have ruled that there are some limits. You can't show pornography to children and call it free speech. You can't publish something about someone that you know is false to ruin their reputation. That's a crime called libel or slander. You can't advocate other things that really are crimes, like rape or murder. But overall, what freedom of speech does is it creates a huge marketplace of ideas. Everybody has their say, and the best idea should win out. Free speech, truly free speech, means that there will be some speech that you personally don't like. It is messy, but it's better than having censorship and propaganda. You asked me to talk tonight about how propaganda works, and my answer is very simple. Propaganda only works in the absence of free speech. That is why Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter is so important. Unlike other social media, Twitter, or X, has broken away from government-required censorship of certain beliefs or ideas that the government did not like on platforms like Facebook. How many people here are on Twitter? Not very many hands. How many are on Facebook? A lot of hands. Wow. Wow. Well, in social media in general, it's messy. And Twitter, since it was bought by Elon Musk, has become a real Wild West. But it's a vast marketplace of ideas where the users can write community notes to fact check, and then other users fact check the community notes. And out of this debate, theoretically, we should arrive at the truth. The cure for bad speech and misinformation and disinformation is not more rules and regulations, but more and better speech. Twitter is probably going to be in trouble from EU censorship laws, the Digital Services Act, DSA. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Free speech is great, but it means that going forward, we are going to have a lot more information coming at us, both good and bad. So, what is a strategy for finding the truth in the sea of propaganda? Again, I'm going to turn to this book. And they recommend a theory called critical ignoring. Think about yourself in the grocery store and you want to buy a bag of chips. You don't feel like you have to read the label on every bag of chips in the store before you pick out one. Well, this one tastes bad, and this one I don't like the company, and this one's unhealthy, and I know I like this brand, so I'm going to pick it up, look at it, and buy it. You practiced critical ignoring. You ignored 90% of the stuff that was on the shelf, and you focused in on the product you were interested in and took a closer look at that. And that's how you're going to survive this onslaught of propaganda. It's like you're Pogacar in the Tour de France. You can't win the race by pedaling as fast as you can all the time. because you would run out of energy and you would drop out of the race. Energy is to a cyclist like information is to a consumer. So you can't possibly pay attention to all of it. There's very interesting research going on right here in Ljubljana that I'd like to close with. It's the Laboratory for Machine Intelligence at the University of Ljubljana. And they are training AI to recognize real videos instead of training them on deepfakes. The researcher says we want to develop a classifier that will determine when something is real, and everything that will not be recognized as real will be flagged as a deep fake. So this strategy of critical ignoring has some value for us as we're faced with hundreds and maybe even thousands of images and pieces of information every day. Focus in on the information that you think is real. Find sources that you like and trust and bookmark them and keep going back to them. And really ignore the rest. And by that, I mean 90% of it. You can't pay attention to everything all of the time. If you're not in the driver's seat, you will be taken for a ride. I hope I've given you a strategy for surviving in the sea of propaganda. And I'm really excited about the question and answer part of this evening, so I'm happy to take your questions. Okay, Andraj, how are we going to do this?
I'll be walking. So you raise hands, and I'll come to you with my microphone, and yeah.
Mhm.
If you do not know how to express your question in English, then I or Damian will translate it to Perry.
I
Any
have
questions?
I have to say that while you're going over there, every day I practice my Slovenian by reading Twitter in Slovene. And one of the people I follow who follows me back is sitting in the audience, so that's exciting.
Okay, so my question is here if what do you think is the future of journalism, where it's heading? Like the traditional media, the news that you listed, all they are quite biased, and it's really difficult to follow this because of all the fact checking. So, what do you think is the future of this?
Well, I'll tell you that in my profession, people are really scared right now. One of the reasons why I have stopped teaching journalism is that I don't think traditional journalism is any longer a viable career for the vast majority of students that go into it because I want to be on TV. Those people don't have a future at all. The people who do have a future are YouTubers, people getting huge followings on Twitter for which they're paid. That's going to be the way to go. I write a travel website because I like to share my experiences and opinions about Slovenia. But with Google changing the way the search engines work, a lot of the travel writers are just giving up. There's no way to get your message out there when the search engines prefer content that's written by AI and not real people. If you guys don't prioritize, give me content written by a real person and not AI, you're going to get AI because that's what they're programmed to give you. And a few big stars in the media make money. The vast majority of my students go out in the marketplace and they get their first job. They can't make enough money to buy their food and pay their rent. They're working 2 or 3 jobs on the side. It's a really sad profession right now, and I would like to think that in the long run it has a future, but in the short run, it's not good. I'm sorry, it's a depressing answer. Yeah.
I come with my microphone.
Yeah.
Okay, I have really good voice. Yeah.
Because we film it to post it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's okay. So I have a question. Do you believe in that in Slovenia are journalists who are like a research journalists, or which were presented to you as investigating journalists of Slovenia? It's a bit funny question.
What are you speaking of a specific outlet like RTV or Delo or?
You know, I German, very renowned newspaper, and then we started to talk which are journalists in Slovenia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I have a question. Do you maybe met some?
Well, I've actually been on RTV on the program Odmevi. When I first came to Slovenia and was studying in the language school for foreigners, some people found out that I was an American journalist and they asked me if I would be on the show, and they allowed me to do it in English. And I was there with Igor Brigant, and we had a very nice discussion. And they were kind of surprised when I said nice things about Melania Trump. And it's weird that they were surprised because they asked me the questions ahead of time. And so they kind of knew what I was going to say. But when I got out there and I actually said it on TV, they were kind of surprised. And I don't think they're going to invite me back. I think what they said was, when you can do it in Slovenia, you can come back. But I really think that there is a strong left wing tilt in the broadcast media here. And if you want to find more variety, you have to go to more of a startup situation that isn't subsidized by government money. When you talk about the interface between journalism and advertising, we have a really bad situation in the United States where most of the advertising for the news comes from the pharmaceutical companies. And so as a result, they never investigate the pharmaceutical companies. And we have just a lot of issues with drugs and people not being healthy. Well, here in Slovenia, you have the whole history of Yugoslavia and communism being in charge during the years when media became a big deal and when television was invented. So, in the holdover from those times are a lot of people who were leftists because that's what you had to be successful in Yugoslavia. And now it just goes back and forth between which government is in charge. When it's a right wing government, they try to get more right wing people in there. And when it's a left wing government, the journalists seem happy because they agree with that a little bit more. So I've, you know,
Like in Ireland, there was a journalist, Veronica Guerini.
oh yeah,
For
yeah,
example.
yeah,
Yeah, she was really investigating
yeah,
journalism.
yeah.
But in Slovenia, we don't, you're a foreigner and
Mm-hmm.
a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
That was my question, who you think is here.
Well,
Do you have any name? I was really,
my son, who is an author,
I know him,
yeah, he translated a book for Bostian Videmsek, who's an excellent journalist. He goes all around the world and he interviews people in refugee camps and on the front lines of war, and he's just an incredible reporter. But he has a personal bias. He published a book recently in English, and I gave it a quick read just to help out with the proofreading. And, clearly he shares his opinions. Um, as far as investigative work, the question is who's going to pay for it? I don't speak Slovenian well enough to know if the right wing Nova 24 channel is doing good stuff. I'm a television girl, so I don't study newspapers that much. There's a guy on Twitter named Bojan Požar who seems to be giving various government figures a hard time, but I don't I don't know if people believe him or not. But we don't.
So the journalist who I met, that he was from Hamburger.
Yeah.
That is like really Frankfurter, maybe Europe.
Yeah, Frankfurter Allgemeine. Yeah.
He was from
Yeah.
Hamburger.
Oh, okay.
No, he said like it was very funny situation. If I may share a
Please.
story, yeah, because I was in the, you're in swimming path and kids, you don't know who person is. It's important where you meet. If you meet someone, he's important journalist. We were both in swimming path kids, and I said in Slovenia we don't have such investigating journalists because of and so on. And then it was very funny coincidence that one girl, which was my age, came and she agreed with me. It was really unusual.
Oh, two Slovenes agree on something. That's amazing.
So he was claiming that Anushka Delic, who was in Panama documents, she's very, if you follow the money,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's. Mhm. Yeah, I love investigative reporting, and I would have done a lot of it, except that it's very expensive. And I always had my boss saying, "Well, what are you going to put on the air today and tomorrow?" But I need 3 months to investigate this story, and you bet your job every time you publish something, so you can't be wrong. If I'm going to go after a politician, I better have the goods on that guy. And I don't see any enthusiasm in Slovenia for that kind of reporting. Um, and it's going to come from somebody who's got a YouTube channel and figures out how to do it.
You said you have a very bad forecast for near future, but maybe better for the mid-term or long-term future. Can you elaborate on that? Where do you see the future of journalism, or put it more specifically? So the thing that that people will become hungry again to get good information and will be willing to pay for it, or how do you see the future, like more distant future, if not if today it's so bad?
Well, I
as you see.
guess I'm just kind of betting on human nature because, as I said in my talk, we don't like information that's bad or wrong, and we don't like to be lied to. And I think over time, people will develop a preference for things that are not written by AI. At the moment in the United States, people have a preference for things that are not made in China because, for various reasons, they're not good quality or it's not politically correct or something. And over time, they will prefer a different product. I think that's what's going to happen with journalism and news media in general. It's going to be so overtaken by AI that no one will pay attention to it. And then people are going to be looking for information, and that will enable people who are journalism entrepreneurs to deliver a product that's real. Right now, the boom that's going on is in newsletters. I have a newsletter. I make it free because I only write it once a month. But there are journalists who are leaving famous outlets like the New York Times and starting newsletters. The most famous one is a woman named Barry Weiss. She had to leave the New York Times because she was conservative and she just couldn't write anything that she felt was true at that paper. So she started a platform called the Substack, and her online newspaper is called the Free Press, which if you read news in English, I highly recommend it. They have very good writers. They really check out their stories, and you can sign up for the front page to come in your inbox every day, and it gives you a really good wrap up of everything that's going on in the world, not just the United States, but the 3 or 4 big stories in Ukraine or the Middle East or Europe. Um, I think that that's the way to go. The problem is that people who have big newsletters on Substack are saying, hey, reader, pay me €4 a month and you can get my newsletter. Well, that adds up, month after month, and then you don't only want to read one person, you want to read everybody. And you can't subscribe to everybody. So I think this model is going to wear itself out pretty soon. But right now, a lot of people are getting out of the mainstream media and starting newsletters, or they're staying in the mainstream media because that way they can get a lot of people to come to their newsletter. Yeah.
What is your opinion on scientific writing? I mean, as a researcher, I'm quite concerned because on a daily basis there are thousands and thousands of scientific papers that are published, but a lot of them are basically fake. So, for example, if you try to replicate some experiment in the lab, it won't work, and you know it's fake.
Yeah.
So, the thing that is concerning me, it's like, you're publishing data, you're publishing, and then those results go to textbooks, those textbooks go to school, and so on. False information is passed. So, what is your opinion on that?
In your opinion, I want to ask a question back at you. In your opinion, does the DEI have any effect. Like, I've heard a lot of talk about how bad scientific information gets out there because people who were not qualified were writing scientific papers. And that was because, maybe they were from a poor country or an underrepresented group, and so their paper was accepted. Or is it that the scientists are just bad? I mean,
This is quite true. I mean, I will say for Slovenia, for example, it's not kind of, sorry, medical science, biomedicine, pharmacy. So the for example, from experience, I would say that the Slovenia in general is not that the favorite country for editors, for reviewers. So when they see University of Ljubljana or just Slovenia, they're like, okay, this thing is not good. But when they see, like, I don't know, like Stanford or something, or Harvard, it's it's a the thing that they see, the name of the institute, it's giving them like, okay,
yeah,
can I please finish?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, this definitely a problem, because the editors are checking the affiliation but not the results.
Wow. Well, it's hard to say, well, just trust the power of free speech, because what should happen is that if a bad paper is published, then other scientists should come forward and say this is not true. Is it possible to do that, or are you shunned even more?
You said that there's some news are because they'll get banned if the government does not like that, and that totally happens around Hong Kong and China. And I have a question, and they also have like people going on TikTok or another version of TikTok in China for telling people like Taiwan's ours, or from God's down, God's up, and Taiwan will be ours, like something like stupid stuff like that. So does that happen in America also, and do you have some examples about it?
You're asking me if people are censored?
Like, do they have also fake propaganda, or
Oh, I
news
see.
following just following the government's mind or something?
Oh, okay. Well, we do know because the man who owns Facebook, Jeff Zuckerberg, has admitted that the government went to him and said, you have to censor information that the government doesn't like. So during COVID, there were many people posting about theories about different ways to treat COVID, different ways to be safe from COVID, and the government didn't agree with it, so they censored it and they banned people from social media. And now all of this is coming out, and people are being allowed to exercise their free speech again. But yes, censorship does happen. And you have to be on guard all the time, because the people who are in power can keep their power if they take away your free speech. And in a country like China, people pay a big price for that. They go to prison. It's very hard to be a journalist in China. I've had friends who have taught journalism there, and they know that their students cannot go out and tell a true story. And what my friend said to me is, you're planting the seeds in their mind for future generations when someday they will be allowed to tell a true story. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I mean, you said it. I mean, how old are you? You're 12, and you can tell the difference. People with university educations, people with just a normal education can tell the difference. I have to tell you a funny story about my students in Maldives. I don't speak Maldivian, but they do a newscast in English as well as Maldivian, so I kind of knew what was going on. But when the Maldivian newscast came on, it was all very formal and very scripted, and they were reading from a paper word for word, whereas the English newscast was more like my style, where you report, you talk to people, you tell them what's going on. And so I investigated this a little bit more, and it turned out they were getting the press release from the president's office and saying, "Good evening, here's the news. His Honor, the President of the Maldives, has done this wonderful thing today, and he is so great because blah, blah, blah." And in Maldivian, that formal language, you know how in Slovenia there's like TV Slovene and then there's the way people really talk to each other? I even as a foreigner, I could tell that the propaganda was going out. And then I found out there was a special room in the television station where they secretly, so I wouldn't know, did these propaganda pieces about how great the president was and just put them on the air, figuring that I wouldn't figure it out. Well, I was given power over the state-owned radio and the state-owned television, and I fired all those people. And I thought I was going to the prison island for that. But I still hear from people in the Maldives who say that while I was there, it got better. And we did real stories that people cared about. Why are they paying so much for electricity? Why is food so all of these issues that people wanted to hear about. But after my team and I left, they went back to propaganda. And that's a very small country. When you're talking about a big country like China or the United States, it's huge.
We have another question here.
Hi.
Hi.
You talked about AI. I was interested, how do you know what pieces of content were written by AI or by another human?
How do you know the difference between content generated by AI and content generated by a human?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sometimes it's obvious, like the little girl and the puppy. Well, she only had one ear and missing 2 fingernails. But it's getting better. That's the scary thing. So much of what we see in the movies now is CGI. It's not real. And Hollywood is really good at it. Back when they landed on the moon, a lot of people thought, oh yeah, they really did that in a studio and it was fake. But they didn't have very good technology at the time. I couldn't have really done it. Now we do have that technology. And I think now, to me, AI stuff looks really fake, but in a few years' time, and maybe less than that, it's not going to look fake. And then that's when we're going to have to trust the labeling. This is AI generated, this is not. And there's, I don't think there should be regulation on speech, but there should be some truth in labeling. Just like you know if your food has GMO in it or not, that has to be labeled. There's going to have to be nutritional content on your media so that you know if this was produced with the assistance of AI or totally by AI or was done by humans. And right now we don't know that. I'm sorry, I hope I answered your question.
Any more questions? Okay.
Hello. So one of the points mentioned before in your presentation was follow the money. So whereabouts of how the media was created, where the funds come from, and I'd like to ask you if you have ever felt the influence of the money, which gave you your pay, maybe that you, or maybe also in the American circles of different media groups, how these different influences of money can be seen, maybe.
Yep. Well, I already mentioned the influence of the pharmaceutical companies. And you will not find many journalists in America investigating the drug industry because that's where their money comes from. But I'll tell you a story about an investigative report that I did for KCBS in Los Angeles, and I was really proud of this story. I was so proud of it. We were out at the General Motors car manufacturing plant, and we were there because there was some controversy with the workers and the union. And while we were there in the news truck, the whistle blew, and it was time for the workers in the factory to take their break. A bunch of them came running out of the factory, and across the street from the factory were 2 liquor stores. These guys, they were all guys, went into the liquor stores. They bought big bags of, who knows, beer, vodka, whatever it was, and they just kind of stood there in front of the liquor stores, and there was a big wall art. There was a big street art there that was like the glorious history of the United Auto Workers Union. And these dudes are leaning up against this wall, just getting absolutely plastered. And then they walked back into the factory like this to build cars. We got it all on video, and we couldn't believe it. It was a great story. We went to the police, and they said, oh, if you gave those guys a breathalyzer test, they'd be too drunk to drive a car, much less build a car. And then CBS said, well, we don't want to be sued, so we think that we need to send a crew over to Japan and see if a similar thing is happening at the Toyota plant. So we got the CBS bureau in Tokyo to go to the Toyota plant. And not only were they not running to the liquor store, they were going to the gym during their break. And they were doing healthy things. They were doing yoga. They were doing karate. They were not drinking. So we did this story. And American media is very commercial. We do have public television, but nobody watches it. Commercial television is very competitive. So we wanted everybody to know that this great investigative story was going to be on. And so we had one commercial that said, should the people who build our cars be drinking in the middle of the workday? Terry Anzur has uncovered this shocking practice. Okay, so we're in the room finishing up the report, and the boss comes in, and he says, I'll take that cassette. We still were working on cassettes at that time. It wasn't digital. And he took it, and he walked out. And I went, what? This has to go on TV in half an hour. Why are you taking my story? And he said, Terry, this needs more research, and in your life, you will never live long enough to do the research. The was that the General Motors car dealers in Southern California heard about the story, and they said that if it ran, they would pull their advertising from the station. That story was never told. So that happened in 1991. Stuff like that happens a lot. You have to be careful that you don't run afoul of the advertisers. That's why I say back in the day there was a firewall. We didn't know or care where the advertising was coming from. But now we do. And this, again, in Europe you tend to have state subsidized media, but they tend to do the bidding of whoever's in power. So, follow the money.
Okay, so thank you for the answer. And the second part of this would be, since the pharmaceutical companies have so much power, what about, so a few years ago, Mark Cuban, is the owner of Dallas Mavericks.
Right.
He made I think only an online company that sells some meds, different medications. How does that influence? And why was it only popular maybe in the media, on the internet a few years ago, and now I haven't heard anything of it for a few years? But it is such, if it were true, it is such a powerful move, because the pharmaceuticals have so much leverage on the industry. Meanwhile, he had medications, and he could do it all. He could bypass the whole problem and sell medications on his own, in his own way, maybe with the prices that he set. Why isn't
that he could sell medications cheaper than the
yes
pharmaceutical industry?
which would take the power from the pharmaceuticals companies.
This is why we're going to get a man named Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in charge of the health regulation in the United States, if he can get confirmed, because it is such a scandal that you have Trump and Mark Cuban, who are two guys who don't agree with each other at all, both saying that this is a problem. You in Europe don't see what we see on television in the United States. If you're watching the news, every commercial is, do you have diabetes? Well, we have this new drug that you can take. And by the way, all the side effects are death, depression, and you're going to commit suicide. But other than that, you won't have diabetes anymore. So talk to your doctor about this. And then the next one comes along. Do you have problems with your skin? Well, we've got a drug for that. Of course, you might kill yourself, but, it's great. And then these drugs, you go to your doctor. It's very expensive. The way our health insurance works for most people, it's not covered. Or, for a few people it is covered, so it becomes popular. It's going to bankrupt our country. And it's too big to fight. It's really too big to fight. There's a feeling right now in America that it's our last chance. Like, if we don't get some people in there who are going to tell the truth, we're going to be in the matrix. It's not good. And I really worry about Europe as well, because I'm a citizen of both places. I'm really proud to be a citizen of two great countries. You see Germany falling by the wayside politically right now, and France is messed up, and there's people running around with this Digital Services Act saying they want to censor everyone, and certainly Elon Musk. It's just, you've got China, Russia running around with their censorship policies. It's, you can only do so much as one little journalist or one consumer of news, but we're in a bad spot right now. In one way, it's a good time to be a journalist because there are a lot of stories to tell.
Thank you, Terry. So there's only one opportunity for another question.
The famous last question. Who will ask? All right. Woo!
Could you find light in this darkness of media and fake news?
Yeah.
What is a positive thing in all of this?
I think human nature. I think people don't like to be lied to, and I think certain people will speak up. And unfortunately, there's a price to be paid for that in some countries. Right now we've got cases that are reported in England where, people complaining about the number of migrants or whatever can have the police come to their house and charge them with a crime because that's speech that the government doesn't like. And it's going to take people getting together, supporting alternate political strategies, because the censorship is going to keep the light from reaching us at the end of the tunnel. So all I can say is free speech. I'm going to end with this. Free speech is the hill I will die on. If we don't have free speech, we don't have anything. And if you just do your part by being a good news consumer, focusing on journalists that are good, maybe subscribe to their newsletter, give them some support, because it does take money to support the people doing this work to bring the truth to light. And You can't do it all by yourself, but you can do a little bit, and don't give up, is what I would say. So thank you again for coming tonight. Oh, I get a present. Thank you. Okay, of course. Oh, beautiful. Wait a minute. I gotta try this puppy on. All right. Woo! Good propaganda. Woohoo! All right. Well, thank you for putting up with me, and I will come back and do it again when I can do it in Slovene.
If I say that in Slovenian, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
And then you'll guess what I said.
Gremo.
Gremo. Torej, there's also other people who don't speak Slovenian, so I say it in English, sorry. Thank you very much for a wonderful turn up. This has been a great evening, Terry. Thank you again from the heart. I'm very happy also to see my friends from the English Mass in Ljubljana. It's a great joy and privilege to have everybody here in the college of the Evening Academy. This is a thing which is going on. Andraž introduced it, and I'm sure he will introduce more academies. And I think he deserves an applause as well. For great job done. Evening academies are not the only thing that we do here. There's another thing that you can benefit from if you're a student, that is. So we have our modular studies. So you pick a module. It takes a semester or something like that. It takes 1 semester to study. Next semester we will have Introduction to the New Testament. The only way you can study that is if you enroll to the University Theological Faculty. But you don't have to, because you can take a module here at the college and study Introduction to the New Testament on the academic level. So it's not like playing bansipato. No. Yeah. Another thing, there will be also rhetorics. We have our wonderful professor Igor Koroshets, whom you have also met. And
he's great.
Great guy. So that there is also place for you to enroll. Another thing is personal finance, which is a great course. Don't be timid. I mean, that the professor is a corporate financier. He covers the whole of Africa for one company, international company. So, but he's a great speaker, quite entertaining, and people who take those courses take away a lot. Another thing that we're going to have next semester is something new, and it's going to be on healthy nutrition, practical side, which means that there will be a nutritionist. I mean, she is a doctor in nutrition, and not only will you know something about what healthy food is and so on, but you will also learn to cook simple and nutritious, healthy food, which is good for students. I wish I had that, but I ate junk all the time. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Damian, and thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Andraž.
For a very nice and detailed and entertaining presentation. So this is the end, or not so the end, because in the other room there's food waiting for you, and you also can make a more personal interview with Terry Anzur. Thank you.
And if you'd like to stay in touch, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I don't like Instagram. I have a YouTube channel, and I also have my website called Strangers in the Living Room. So if you follow me, just send me a little message. Hey, I met you at the thing, and then I'll follow you back.